Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 38 of the Technology for Good show. We are guestless today, I'm afraid. It's just me. I have put an invite out there to anyone who wants to join. I've sent out the address, so somebody may join in, but for now, it's me on my own. So we'll get on with it. It's been an interesting week. I spent the last few days in Berlin at the SAP TechEd event, the European one. I went to their Vegas one during the week. I'm just going to put the shutter down here. It's a bit bright on my left. So the show was interesting. I had some good conversations there with people. Not a lot of breaking news out of there, really, considering they'd done a lot of the announcements already at their Vegas one 2 weeks earlier, which we discussed on the show 2 weeks ago. So with that, we'll head into the stories. And the first story, as usual on the show, we start with a bit of bad news. And this one is particularly unfortunate. This story by Katie Valentine on the Think Progress site talks about a new report showing that countries globally are spending $88 billion a year on finding new fossil fuel reserves. Now, the report comes from from Oil Change International and the British think tank, the Overseas Development Institute, and it found that G20 nations, including China, India, the US, and the EU, are spending $88 billion annually on fossil fuel exploration. This is the double the investment that the International Energy Agency says is needed to power the world by 2030. Now, this is hugely problematic because, and I've mentioned this on this show before, there's already far more proven reserves of fossil fuels on the planet than the planet can sustain. So we've agreed to hold global warming to 2 degrees centigrade. And to get to 2 degrees centigrade, we only need to emit another 565 gigatons of CO2. And at the moment, we're outputting somewhere between 30 and 40 gigatons of CO2 per year. So we don't have that many years left at the rate we're going before we hit 2 degrees C. On top of that, the fossil fuel companies have, as of 2013, 2,795 gigatons of CO2 of proven reserves. So they've already got proven reserves, which are about 5 times the amount we need to emit to get to 2 degrees C. And then on top of that, we read today that governments are funding to the tune of this $88 billion annually more money for fossil fuel exploration. In other words, to get more proven reserves, to bring that 2,795 figure up. It's just insanity. It's insanity. It makes no sense at all. But as usual, the first story on the show is always a downbeat one, as this is very much. So to counter that, the rest of the stories are all good news. So on we'll go with the better news stories. And one of the big ones this week was that the probe Philae, I presume that's how you pronounce it, Philae, it was a probe that was sent down from the spacecraft Rosetta onto the comet 67P. So this is the first time in history mankind has managed to land a probe on a comet. The comet is some 300 million miles away, and it's flying, it's 2 miles wide, and it's flying at, I don't know, something like 50,000 miles an hour or something ridiculous like that. So you've got this comet flying at 50,000 miles an hour, 300 million miles away. Comet's only 2 miles wide. We orbit it. We get this Rosetta spacecraft. We fly it up there. We fly it up there 10 years ago. 10 years later, it encounters it exactly when it was supposed to, orbits it for a few weeks, and then drops this probe onto it. The landing didn't go quite to plan, fair enough, but still, it's on the comet now, and it's taking photographs and sending them back to Earth, 300,000 miles away. It's just the feat of engineering that was involved in doing that is just off the charts awesome, amazing. I mean, I don't know how they did it. I have no idea, and I'm sure if they tried to explain it to me, I couldn't comprehend it for a second. This is the first photo from the surface of Comet taken by the Philae lander, right here, this thing. This is it, the very first photograph taken on the surface of a comet. Just unbelievable. I mean, wow, technology blows me away every single time. Moving on from that, and the next story I came across was this one, how SpaceX will soon be launching satellites for low-cost internet. So this is an article about SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk, and how he has said that he's going to launch a series of 700 microsatellites that will provide high-speed, low-cost, unrestricted internet access. He also stated that more details would be available in a formal announcement in 2 or 3 months. So it's still a bit low on details. It's actually 640 satellites that they're going to do to make up a constellation in orbit around the planet. They'll keep the price down using components that will be made in-house. The satellites are going to cost less than $1 million each, 640 at $1 million each. So it's going to have an ultimate cost of around $1.5 billion. And they'll have to go through lots of funding rounds to try and raise the funds to do it. But obviously, with someone like Elon Musk on board, that shouldn't be too big a problem. The devices, they say, are going to weigh 125 kilos each, but they'll pack enough technology to rival full-size satellites that currently weigh twice as much. Each satellite is anticipated to have a throughput of 14 gigabits per second, which is quite fast, but that speed will depend very much then on how many people are using it concurrently. So this is a watch this space story very much. It's low on details, but it's interesting. I mean, we've had discussions here before on this show about Google's Loon project, where they're doing high orbit balloons for dispersing internet access, and Facebook's drone project, where they're sending up drones to disperse internet access, and now SpaceX are going to do it as well. So at the moment, there's a little over 1.5 billion people on the planet who have internet access. 7 billion people on the planet. 1.5 billion of them have internet access. But very soon, between Google, Facebook, and this SpaceX project, it seems that we're going to get far, far more people online, which can only be good for everyone. Then, slight change of pace here, and not quite in the space age, but this new drone from DJI called the Inspire 1, according to this review at least, is one of the best drones that has been yet made. It's the company DJI have made several drones to date, and they've got one called the Phantom, which is really, really good. Apparently, I've never flown one, but they make these amazing drones, and this new one, their Inspire 1, is particularly good for a number of reasons. So the Inspire 1 is good because it has a lot of the technology they developed for their more expensive drones. It's a quadcopter, but it's got a 4K video camera on board, and it can take 12 megapixel photographs. It also has a ground pointing camera as well, so a camera that points directly downwards, and it uses that to deploy its landing gear just before it hits the ground, so that it has a nice, soft, safe landing. This this article has got this video at the top. I'm not going to play it now, but it's got this video at the top, and you can press that. It's about a 5-minute video if memory serves, and it goes into a lot of detail and shows some great shots from the drone. And the drone has got these 2 arms, one on either side, and the 2 arms have 2 rotors on each arm. And when it flies, the arms raise up, and when it comes into land, the arms bend back down again. The reason the arms bend back down is that they are the landing gear, and the reason they go upwards when it's in the air is so that the camera mounted underneath, the 4K camera mounted underneath, can get a 360-degree picture without the legs being in the way. So it's very cool. So that's all the good side. The downside of it is that it costs about $2,800, which I guess if you're a drone enthusiast is, doable. But if you're just a hobbyist, then 2,800 might stretch it just a little bit. I know it's not in my budget anyway, but it looks very cool. I've seen a couple of wedding videos, for example, that have been done with this kind of thing, and I can imagine wedding photographers drooling over something like this. Now, getting into applications. So applications for the phone. Google has released a material design messenger app for Android. So far this app is for Android only. They haven't released it for iOS or Windows Phone yet. If you don't like using the Hangouts for SMS on Android, the Google Hangouts app, well, now there's this new messaging app which appeared on the Play Store this morning, which brings their material design language to the SMS app. So it looks quite well. It really does. It's added a couple of new bits to the app, along with the design refresh, ability to block people, rapid photo sharing, emoji support, and so on and so on. To get it, there's a link here. You can get it from Google Play. You need to be running Android 4.1 or upwards to get it. And if you've upgraded to Lollipop, or if you are upgrading to Lollipop, then you will automatically get it. So that's a cool bit of news out of Google on that side. Then there's this great review on TechCrunch of the new Google Inbox. So Google Inbox is a new client app for Gmail, and it's only for Gmail, and it's only for Gmail email addresses. So by that I mean, so I've got a number of email addresses. One of them is my work one. It's tom@redmonk.com, and that tom@redmonk.com email address runs out of Gmail. But I can't use Google Inbox for this because it's an @redmonk.com address. It's not an @Gmail address. So to use Inbox, you have to have an @gmail.com email address. It will only work with the @Gmail domain. But if you do get it, it's actually quite nice. It works obviously on Android phones, on iOS phones. I'm not sure if there's a Windows Phone version of it. Not only that, it's also got a desktop interface as well, and that's at inbox.google.com. And it's got a beautiful UI, really, really nice UI. It's got a lot of nice functionality into it. This review here will go through it in some detail. I have it for my own Gmail address. My Gmail address is traftery@gmail.com. If anyone wants an invite to it, I think I have 1 or 2 invites left. If anyone wants an invite to it, drop me a comment, leave me an @techforgood hashtag request, or email me. You have my email addresses now. Get in touch, ask me for an invite, and if I have a spare one, I'll be happy to bang it onto you. Google as well, speaking of Google, I've been involved in this initiative to pinpoint illegal fishing in near real time using satellite photography. They've worked with a group spearheaded by Oceana. They're a conservationist group, and Google have provided them with financial and engineering support. And they launched a prototype of it at the IUCN World Parks Conference in Sydney, and basically what it does is it shows up fishing vessels, and some of them are registered as commercial fishing boats, others were boats that were out there, but that could be seen from the satellite imagery to be behaving like fishing boats. And behaving like fishing boats is probably going in a grid pattern in a certain way. So these boats have been, or it's possible to identify them as potential fishing boats just by looking at the way they behave. So the first what am I saying? The first prototype of this showed data that was 2 to 3 days old, but now they're bringing it up to speed so that it's near real time. So the hope is that it will do a lot to counteract illegal fisheries, and there's a huge amount of illegal fisheries going on. So if this can be counteracted, all the better. We've seen fish stocks globally plummet by about 90% in the last 50 years. So this kind of thing is urgently required. So good job, Google, on doing this. And more needs to be done now to work on catching these illegal fishermen. Staying with Google, a lot of news out of Google this week. Google's Nexus 6 is their latest smartphone. And this deep dive review, this is a 2-page review of this smartphone. It comes out very well from the review, in fact. So as I say, this is a long review. I'm going to scroll down through it, down. Oh no, I got to the comments. Down through it, you can see it's a 2-page one, and they go through everything from the camera to the apps to the UI to the battery life, the whole thing. And basically, the only fault that they find with it in the review is the fact that it's as big as it is. It's slightly bigger than even some of the Samsung phones. So it's kind of halfway between a phone and a tablet. So it's your basic phablet. It's got an amazing screen apparently. So if you are in the market for a large screen smartphone, the Nexus 6 should be on your list to check out at the very least, according to this anyway. Moving off phones and away from Google for a minute, SanDisk have launched this interesting device. It's a Lightning-enabled thumb drive for iPhones and iPads. And so you can see here in the picture, it doesn't just have a USB connector, it also has this Lightning connector. And the idea is that if you have an iOS device and you use it to take pictures, you can then plug this into the device and it'll download the pictures off the device for you and keep them safe. And also, obviously, you can, if you have pictures on the iPad, you want to transfer them to the phone, you sync it up with the iPad, it'll download the pictures and then attach it to the phone and you can upload the pictures there. Similarly, if you want to get them onto your computer, same thing. Now, a lot of this functionality already exists. I mean, you've got AirDrop on the iPad and AirDrop on the iPhone and computers and stuff. It's already there. I'm not sure that this particular device is as necessary as it might seem. Perhaps, I mean, it comes with software on it. It comes with an app that you can do setup syncing and stuff like that. If you have a Mac already and you plug in your phone, the iPhotos application already starts up, and you can have that to synchronize as well. So it's an interesting one. I don't know how necessary it is. As I say, a lot of the functionality that it has is already available in other ways. One thing, I guess, given that it has a Lightning connector on it, one thing it has in its benefit, in its favor, is that the Lightning connectivity is going to be fast. So that'll be faster than USB and faster than AirDrop, I suspect. So Seagate apparently have prepped for a 30 terabyte laser-assisted hard drives, and what this story is about basically is the fact that hard drives are, the amount of info you can get on a hard drive is dictated to by the kind of the space in between the ones and zeros, if you want. And Seagate have come up with this new technology to allow them to project or to increase the capacity of their hard drives 5-fold. It's a laser technology. It's known as heat-assisted magnetic recording, or HAMR. It's able to write smaller, more stable bits onto the magnetic surface of a spinning disk. Today, the largest capacity drive is 6 terabytes, and they think that they could increase that to 30 using this technology. So it's interesting. I'm not sure because of the rise of SSDs. SSDs obviously can hold more information, but they're more expensive. So spinning disks do still have a place. And at the end of the article, they talk about how you get the crossover between some drives which have a cache, an SSD cache on them, combined with the spinning platters. So it looks like spinning platters, spinning hard drives still have another bit to go, and I wouldn't write them off just yet. New devices from new devices help iOS steal back enterprise share from Android. Yeah, so this story is about how the new iPhone 6 and 6 Plus have bolstered the sales of Mac devices. So, of iOS devices. And what we have in the enterprise space is almost the reverse of the consumer space. You can see here that roughly the net activation by platform in the third quarter of 2014, so that's July through September, 69% of activations were for iOS devices, 29% were Android, 1% Windows Phone, and 1% other. I'm not sure what that other might be. But basically, this is almost the opposite of what's happening in the consumer space. In the consumer space, it's about 20 to 30% iOS and the rest Android and small bits of BlackBerry and Windows. Whereas in the enterprise space, it's very much iOS taking the day. And that's got to be bolstered by the deal that Apple have done with IBM to roll out support for enterprise customers. And I saw a story during the week as well how Apple are hiring enterprise sales execs. So Apple are really chasing down the enterprise space, and it's similar as well if you look at tablet activations as opposed to phone activations. 89% of tablet activations in the enterprise space are on iOS, and only 11% of tablets in the enterprise space are Android. So really, Apple have a huge holding in there, and Windows are nowhere to be seen. I mean, apart from the 1% Windows Phone, Microsoft have lost the enterprise battle on the mobile side. They don't have any phones. They don't have any tablets in there. The new tablet they have is apparently doing reasonably well, but they have a good bit of space to make back up. Facebook has given its privacy policy a makeover, and this was not before time. Really. It's almost counterintuitive, Facebook having a privacy policy, because no one expects anything they put on Facebook to be private, do they? But their new policy is 2,700 words, which is down from the previous policy of more than 9,000. And they've tried to make it more simple for people. So this is a good move on their part. They're trying to make it easier to digest. Apparently, it's color coded with graphics marking major subject areas, like how do we use this information and how can I manage or delete information about me. They have a privacy basics tutorial under the headline of "You're in charge," and this move by Facebook, it has to be said, is a good one. It's trying to make this more accessible, and there's a comment at the end of this by Pam Dixon, who's the executive director of the advocacy group World Privacy Forum, and Pam says that this is a huge improvement, it's a step in the right direction. I'd have to agree that anything that makes it easier for privacy policies to be understood can only be a good thing. For too long, privacy policies by companies have been written by lawyers as opposed to written by people who speak English. So you get these horrific legalese documents, which are just incomprehensible to the layperson. And you never know what you're signing up to, no matter how carefully you try and read it. So end user agreements are usually awful. So having one that is not only more digestible, but it's also, you know, color coded and things. This is a good move on Facebook's part. Microsoft, they've patched a critical bug in Windows which has affected every version of Windows since 1995. So this was a bug that was discovered by IBM security researchers earlier this year, and they quietly took Microsoft aside in May of this year and said, look, we've found this bug in your system and it's a really nasty one. There's no evidence apparently that the bug is being exploited in the wild, but it's been rated 9.3 out of 10 on the common vulnerability scoring system. So it's a very serious bug, and as I say, it affects every version of Windows going back to Windows 95. It's one that can allow remote takeover of your machine. So the patch to fix it came out on Tuesday. It's a 19-year-old flaw, as you see in the subhead here. The patch to fix it came out on Tuesday, so if you haven't yet applied the patch to your system, do so ASAP, because when these patches come out, people reverse engineer them quickly to find the bug if they're not aware of it already. So if you're on Windows, very serious bug, go for it, patch it, fix your device. Microsoft had an interesting week as well, because they've taken their .NET open source and cross-platform. So what this means is if you develop using .NET, it's now open source. And not alone that, but you can use it to create applications for Linux and for OS X. So a huge, huge change on Microsoft's part. It's taken .NET to both Mac and Linux soon, and it's open sourcing most of the server-side .NET Core stack, starting with the next version. What I'm not sure of yet, and I did look around to see if I could find out, what I'm not sure of yet is whether they will be open sourcing their Visual Studio, or whether they'll be making Mac or Linux versions of Visual Studio. I suspect not yet anyway. So this was a huge move on Microsoft's part, because .NET had been platform specific for so long, and it was kind of seen as the crown jewels. And for developers, this is a huge story, I think. And it signals a big shift in policy on Microsoft's part, which we've started to see since Satya Nadella took over. He's trying to make Microsoft into a far more relevant company, because as we've seen on the mobile side a few minutes ago, they've started to become quite irrelevant in a lot of areas. And if this can help Microsoft, and if it can help their Azure platform, then it's a good move on their part. And we'll see how that plays out. But I can see a lot of developers getting quite excited about this announcement. Moving into transportation, and there's this story from the IFL Science, to try and avoid the F-bomb, site, talking about how graphene-based supercapacitors could lead to battery-free electric cars within 5 years. And basically, this is a technology that is the collaboration of scientists at Rice University and Queensland's University of Technology, which resulted in 2 papers published in the Journal of Power Sources and in Nanotechnology. And it's about how supercapacitors, basically wedged between films of graphene, might replace the need for a battery altogether within 5 years in electric vehicles. And the advantage of having supercapacitors is that they can take in energy and discharge energy a lot quicker than batteries can. So the time to charge and the time to discharge would decrease significantly, and it should be possible to make supercapacitors which would give these cars a range of 300 to 500 miles. And now, you've got to be wary when you read these stories, because within 5 years, the technology hasn't been developed yet, so the within 5 years is very, very speculative, obviously. So don't be expecting in 5 years' time to walk into a dealership and pick up a super capacitor-driven car. A lot of these technologies that are 5 years out are perpetually 5 years out. So until we actually see a supercapacitor capable of driving a car, then this is all very much in the realms of science fiction. But at least, at least the technology is getting closer to making this dream become a reality. And even if it doesn't work in the electric vehicle space, the technology that comes out of this will have uses in a lot of areas. So it's phenomenal to see. Almost every week we're seeing new storage technology, battery technology, energy technology announcements coming out. This space has taken off huge time in the last 5 years, and the announcements are coming hot and heavy. And speaking of transportation and cars, a group of, or two groups actually, of car manufacturers, the world's 19 biggest automakers, have agreed to principles to protect driver privacy. And, you know, if you're wondering what that's about, it's the fact that cars are increasingly becoming computerized. They have computers built into them which have access to all kinds of information about the owner and about the car and about the location of the car, how many people are in the car, and all kinds of other information as well, how long the car has been driving for. So if you're driving down the road, your car knows how long you've been driving because it knows when the car was turned on and how long it has been turned on for. Very often modern cars now know how many of the seatbelts are being used. So if there are 4 seatbelts being used, there's at least 4 people in the car. So this kind of information, while it sounds trivial, and I know your location too, obviously. While this information sounds trivial, it's actually information that a McDonald's might be interested in, or a service station might be interested in. So to have this information available, there are privacy implications there that need to be tackled. So now these 19 auto manufacturers, and there's a list of them at the end of the article. So they're everyone from Aston Martin right the way through to Volvo and Ferrari, Ford, General Motors, etc. All the usual suspects are in there. They've signed up to this agreement to keep safe the information of the drivers. And there's always a proviso there that this information will be kept safe unless the owner agrees to having the information shared. So if I agree that I will accept to have offers made to me, if I give away my information, then yeah, then my information is given away. But if I say, no, I want my information kept safe, then that's it. Your information isn't shared, and you don't get the offers. So it's trading one thing for the other. Nothing unusual in that, but it's good to see the car manufacturers have seen that this is a possibility, and they are standing up and putting the rights of their drivers in place. Now, as I said, I was at the SAP TechEd event in Berlin during the week, and I had a chance to interact there with the IoT labs that they had set up. They had a special section set up on the show floor where they had little, what are they called, microprocessors, microcontrollers, basically, little like Arduinos and BeagleBones and things like that. And they had them connected to computers, and they had sensors and cables and power sources so that you could, connect them up, interrogate them, see what they were doing, basically do a little bit of programming, check out these devices, and play. They were also making a telepresence robot that could move around, be controlled from a tablet, and all this kind of very cool stuff. So, these kinds of things where you're not just programming, but you're also hardware hacking, these kind of things have become very, very trendy lately. I don't know if trendy is the right word either, because trendy has kind of got certain negative connotations associated with it, but they've become very common, and very easy to get your hands on. Just go over to Amazon and type in Internet of Things microcontroller, and you get a boom long list of things. In fact, if you are doing that, make sure when you type in IoT controller or microcontroller, type in IoT microcontroller kit, or startup kit, or starter kit, or some kind of similar phrase, because some of the kits they have are really, really good. And it's better to get a kit, because then you get some sensors, you get some cables, and you get everything you need. And little things, as I say, like the beagle bones and little things, have some good controllers that you can get some good time with. And if you have kids especially, it's nice to be introducing them to these things. And if I'm talking about all that, that's a long-winded introduction to this Spark Photon, a $19 kit for building your own Wi-Fi enabled products that I saw today. So it raised $560,000 on Kickstarter for its Arduino Spark Core Wi-Fi connector kit. It went on to raise another 4.9 Series A, launch a Cloud OS to power its Internet of Things enabling hardware, and now it's back with the Spark Photon. It's a postage stamp sized Wi-Fi development board for building connected devices. So for people who are into doing things with little microcontrollers, this seems like a nice little piece of kit to add into your little kit, frankly. You can see the size of it there. It's quite small, fits in the hand, and gives you Wi-Fi capabilities for anything that you're doing, any hardware hacking that you're doing. And the last few stories I have are in this area around hardware hacking. And basically, because I saw them in TechEd and had a chance to play with them, I dug into a few stories around that in this space. And the next one I came across was this Tesla. It's at tesla.io. And it's a little board you can buy. And the idea is that you buy this little board and you can connect it to other things like the Wi-Fi one we saw there, and you get this the Tesla NPM package that you can download. It runs JavaScript, no server necessary, so you can use your own IDE and libraries to program physical applications on it. You can connect it to things. You can see here there are little modules that you can get: Bluetooth, audio, accelerometers, temperature and humidity, and so on and so on. So when you get all these little kind of modules and you add them onto it and you start playing with it using JavaScript, there's all kinds of fun things you can do. And you know, when you start doing these things and when you start showing these things to kids, their imaginations kind of light up. They start getting interested in this kind of stuff. Having a chance to play with some of these things, as I did at the TechEd show in Berlin, really opened it up to me as well. I'd been aware of these before, but I hadn't had a chance to play. And I had a chat there with SAP's Craig Schmeichel, and he brought me over and sat me down, and we went through some of the things. And no, it was good fun. And I'm going to try investing in some of these. I'm going to do a bit of investigation for us to try and find some good kits and get some of these and start playing. And I might even show them on the show in a couple of weeks' time when I have something decent to show for my playing. And Tesla isn't the only one. There's another one called BeagleBone, which I forgot to line up a link for, but it's a good one as well. Intel have one as well. They had one called Galileo, and they have this new one called Edison. Again, most of these things will be available through, as I say, the likes of Amazon or wherever. The Intel one has a particularly powerful processor, and there's all kinds of things you can do with it as well. So you can get an Edison kit for Arduino, breakout boards, different Spark blocks for their module and things like that. You've got software downloads like the Arduino IDE. So, I mean, there's all kinds of fun things you can do with this as well. You've got your Raspberry Pis, and Raspberry Pi, similar kind of idea, another microcontroller, connectable. Raspberry Pi had an announcement this week as well, that they've come out with their new Model A+, which is on sale now for $20. So what do you get for your $20? Well, you get a smaller, more energy efficient, and very affordable microcontroller. It has 256 megs of RAM, but it's smaller, 65 millimeters in length. versus 86 millimeters for their Model A. It consumes less power and has many improvements that they made over the Model B Plus. It's got micro SD, better audio, more GPIO. So, you know, the takeaway from this is that if you're interested in this space at all, there's lots happening, and you probably know that already. If you're not interested in this, maybe it's something you should look into, because it's a space that's really opening up, it's blowing out, and all kinds of fun things are happening there. And particularly, as I said, if you have kids, this is a real fun thing that you can get into with them. Last story of today, and we're ending early because there's only me on the show today. But the last story today is Smart Things. So Smart Things is a hub which comes with an application, and what it does is it allows you to control various IoT devices you might have in home. It can control Philips bulbs, it can control door locks, it can control, you know, third-party bits and pieces. And Smart Things was bought by Samsung in September of this year. And as a result of the acquisition, it was August of this year. Sorry, my mistake. It was bought by Samsung in August of this year, and as a result of that, there are several new integrations that Smart Things have rolled out. The new integrations include Samsung's connected fridges, their washing machines, air conditioners, and robot vacuums. So like the little, is it Roombas they're called? So Samsung have one of those, which is not yet on sale in the US, but the Smart Things can connect to them. So if you do get one of those in the US next year, then you'll be able to control it with Smart Things. And the Smart Things app on your phone or your tablet or whatever will be able to control them. Smart Things is only available in North America right now, but internationally it's supposed to come out sometime next year. Okay, that's all the stories we have for you this week. So if you are used to watching this show, then you get your 20 minutes of your life back. I see there's a couple of people after coming in, John and Michael. If you guys want to make any comments, feel free to unmute yourselves and drop in. One thing I will say quickly is that I've got a SoundCloud account, and what I'm going to start doing at the end of this show every week now is taking the audio from this from this show, and uploading it to SoundCloud. So it's generally a long show. It generally runs to about an hour, and people don't always have the time to give a full hour to a video. But often for people who commute, for example, they might have an hour to listen to audio. So from now on out, every week, this show will be published not just in video on YouTube, but also in SoundCloud in audio as well. So in the write-up I'll put up the show, I'll write the show up in Green Monk, and I'll put a link to the SoundCloud account I have. So you'll be able to subscribe there, and every week get the show in audio. So that's it for this week. Thanks for your time and interest, guys, and we'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll have a guest co-host next week, and we'll see you then. As I said already as well, anyone wants a Google Inbox invite, I do have one or two of them. I'm not sure exactly because I haven't checked. But if the first few people to contact me by Twitter, by Facebook, by email, by whatever, you're going to get an invite. All right. See you guys next week. Cheers.